just with Rabbit Hole, do you want to elaborate on any particular sequences or give the general gist of what the show is about?
I mean, the show is about corporate espionage. I mean, it's great because it's got an amazing cast with Kiefer. You have Charles Dance. You have Peter Weller. You know, it's classic intrigue and some violence. You know, again, a lot of it is world building and telling about the technology and how that informs the story. You know, deceit, encryption, what is reality. But it's very based. I mean, it's very, you know, run and gun. You know, and so with that, it's like it's telling the story quickly and adapting the best technique as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And speaking of Rabbit Hole, I was curious if you could talk a little bit about it, as well as how did you first get involved?
Yeah, I mean, it's a project coming in fast and furious, like many, and as many of these, many of us, Paramount Plus, as well as other streamers, we're trying to, spin up and build out content and work well. I was blessed with my team and the producers I work with having a very good relationship with the showrunners already, so they already had that shorthand in line. And this one, we had to get a lot done in a fairly quick time, but it was great. It was one of those projects that expands bigger than you expected. There's a lot of world building with it, so it's fun. And that's something I kind of like to do, whether it's old school, classical, historical recreations, or in this case, it was an amalgamation of Ontario for Manhattan. And
doing a bunch of them myself right now.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, with how that works out and with best practices and finances and taxes, but no, it's interesting because it's almost you're mashing up the best of different locations and seeing what works for for literally the photography and how you could execute it. So, I mean, this was, and it had a lot of different requests and a lot of different tasks and techniques we had to utilize, and it's intrigue, but it's fun. It's like anything else. It's like digging in to get your head around what's most important to the storytellers, to the showrunners. So in this case, we spoke a lot about what's inspiring this project, and there's a lot of discussions about things like Manchurian Candidate, and things, the French Connection and things like that are more thriller, espionage, and that kind of genre. And in this case, it was like, actually it's interesting, just speaking how my visuals inform creative beats and visual performances and violent intentions in some cases. I mean, it gets pretty, it gets a little bloody here and there, but a lot of it was some really interesting, world building using some real-time technologies and some classical visual effects techniques, and we did a lot of different work. I mean, giant explosions and technical splits between different performances, a lot of run and gun green screen work in the streets of Ontario, and kind of making that work blend in pretty seamlessly, stealing the best of Times Square and seeing how that matches up with Canada, yeah. So it's some interesting challenges for sure. And this one the timeline wasn't forever and a day, so we had to work pretty fast. We had about 200 shots, so it was pretty sizable show. But no, the best part is really getting in the heads of the creatives and seeing what you can bring to the table. And there's a lot of shots that were shot on set and beautiful, and in our cases we're like, what would make this better in post if we can kind of make it more jarring and scary and more dramatic or impactful. So we had a lot of those discussions, and I think that was that's when I get excited about, like, what I can contribute to the storytelling process, as designed by the showrunners. And I think that's something also valuable, even as like, I'm just a small cog in a big machine, kind of as a visual effects artist on the ground level. It's like, what I mean, you're really telling part of the story visually. Whether it's like what you want to say, like, how am I going to make this impactful? What's the goal of this as a storyteller? You really want to start asking yourself that, even as a composer, even as a modeler, and certainly as an animator. What is this? What do you want to convey to the audience? And I worked with Fincher, and I worked with a lot of great directors, and I think, like, those are the things that, like, wow, it's like, I think this person would be kind of just arrogant and much more narcissistic about just their intent of what's inside their own head and how amazingly cool they are. But it's not. It's like, if you're really telling good storytelling, you're asking yourself constantly, does the audience get it, or how do I go about telling this visually so the audience does get this, and how are you going to tell that story? So getting outside your head, and that's kind of this pitfall always artists have. Even if you're a painter or sculptor or a visual effects supervisor or artist, it's like, yeah, you get it because you're inside your own head, but does the audience get it? And that's the huge challenge.
I love that, and it's so very true. When it comes to approaching the project initially, when you're going through the script treatment, like, was there anything that stood out as being exceptionally challenging? Like, okay, this is one I'm gonna have to circle back to. What was your experience like leading up to it?
Well, I mean, I think it just had a lot of, there's a lot of run and gun. There's very, base visual effects kind of treatments. But then there was this, like, a lot of, encryption technology, and intrigue. There's a lot of, there's telling stories with graphics and inserts. A lot of it is, corporate espionage, obviously. Telling that story to the world, being trying to make a visual that helps augment that story. A lot of it is creative problem solving as well. It's like, we can't get to this one location, we have to extend it. And that's something that's like just a baseline thing that any project's going to face. So location, time, expanse of world. And there's a lot of those kinds of shots, a lot of those kinds of world building shots. It's a lot of run and gun, dirty stuff on, shot on phones, and then, like, okay, well, let's track this in and make this work and make it look like beautiful and cool. As a digital media, and just, very untraditional and crazy run and gun stuff, as well as some really beautiful photography as well, and how that gets integrated with the rest of it. Some of it's your classic, like, how do I make this stunt work, and how do I make it work safely but very impactful and scary and amazing, which I've done a lot of that kind of work as well, between all sorts of things exploding, people dying with swords and being chopped up, the usual the usual job of visual effects.